So the touch of the Lord breaks through the isolation of these two women. It cuts through the experience of death which is marking their life. In the case of the woman with the hemorrhage, she's someone who suffers a social death, isolated and cut off from society by the purity laws which mark her as unclean, unfit for integration into a civilized society. And in the case of the child, the daughter of Jairus, she's isolated and cut off by a real death, by that definitive moment which separates her from her loved ones and friends. And it's the touch of the Lord, the intervention of Christ, which cuts through these moments of isolation and brings them back into the center of a new community, a community figured and surrounded on Christ. But for all of the similarities in the lives of these two women, I think it's equally important to notice the differences, the things that mark them out as distinctive. Jairus approaches Jesus from the front. He's a man of status and a man of some wealth because his daughter seems to have a bedroom of her own. He approaches Christ head on, almost as an equal. He dares to address the Lord and to make this show of begging the Lord for the Lord's mercy. And then the woman with the hemorrhage approaches Christ from behind, in secret. She has used up all of the resources that she had on an attempt to sort her own life out, an attempt to be cured by the powers of medicine. And it seems that in some cases she may even have given her money to charlatans who only made the situation worse. So one approaches Christ from the front and another creeps up and dares only to touch the hem of the Lord's garment. And I think the message here for us is that the love of Christ and the healing grace which he communicates to us is entirely non-competitive. Just because the woman with the hemorrhage has been healed doesn't mean that Christ won't also heal Jairus' daughter and restore her to life. In fact, these two lives, marked by inequality, one wealthy and important, and one forgotten and even downtrodden, in this moment of human extremity, in this moment of profound precarity, their common humanity is manifest. Their common dependence on the Lord is shown for all that it is. And so each of them is healed by Christ by the conjunction of words and touch. In each case, the Lord is either touched or touches them, taking them by the hand, being touched on the hem of his garment. And in each case, words are important. Christ addresses them and speaks and commends them for their faith. And so each of these healing encounters in a different way foreshadows the sacraments of the church, those means by which Christ communicates his healing to us by a physical form of touch and by a form of words. And so it is, I think, a gentle reminder to us in this time of social isolation of the need to return, when it's safe and prudent to do so, to the practice of receiving the sacraments in person, receiving the healing touch of Christ, coming to us again and again in a bodily form. But for all of the restoration that these healing stories speak of, the reintegration of these two women into the life of the community, there are hints that something more is going on. They don't just return to an old community, to an old way of life, but there are hints that they're living already something which Christ will live in his resurrection. By participating in Christ's life and death through the power of his grace, these women are brought to live a new life, a life of resurrection grace. And this is seen most powerfully in the case of the little child who becomes an icon of Christ's healing mystery for us. For Christ himself will enter into the isolation of death and will break that isolation open in his resurrection. Christ will take upon himself all of the isolation and loneliness of death and redeem it in his life-giving resurrection. And so the sacraments are for us a kind of divine response to our experiences of human loneliness and isolation. No matter how cut off we may feel from God, and no matter how isolated we may have been in these months from our loved ones and friends and from our Christian community, the Lord's embrace, his words of healing, break through that isolation and restore us to life. They give a new meaning to our loneliness as an opportunity to turn to the Lord in prayer and to be at the heart of his Christian community, turning our loneliness and isolation into that chamber of prayer where our prayer can be particularly efficacious for those who most need the touch of the Lord's mercy. And something of this is shown, I think, in the mysterious reference that St. Mark makes to the age of Jairus' daughter. We're told that she starts to move around because she's 12 years old. And in a way, that makes a connection with the woman who has suffered 12 years of hemorrhage. It shows the similarity of the two cases. But I think there's also something deeper going on in this reference to the number 12. And that's to say that 12 years old was, at the time of Christ, regarded as the threshold of adulthood, the cusp of maturity. And so the woman with the hemorrhage has endured an entire process of maturity, an entire length of a life, suffering this problem of hemorrhage. And this child who is restored to life has died at the very moment when she should have been entering into her, or at least looking forward to her mature years. 12 years old was the age when a young girl might begin to think about her betrothal, her time of entering into society in a new way. And so these two figures represent the Lord restoring them to potential, restoring them not only to life, but to a bright future. No matter how old we are, no matter the journey that our life has taken, no matter how cut off and isolated we may feel, when we experience the Lord's touch of redemption in the sacraments, we are restored not only to life, but to a glorious future, to a new potential, a potential that we may not see or imagine, but a potential which is buried with the Lord. And so in each of our lives, may we dare to reach out, to touch the Lord, to ask for his redemptive grace in our lives, to ask him to touch the loneliness of our hearts and to break them open so that we may see how we may be useful for our brothers and sisters. And in all of that, may we dare to hope that the Lord who restores us to life also bestows on us a future of possibilities which are beyond our imagining, future possibilities which are buried with Christ and come to life with him in the glory of his resurrection.